Breaking news from the Dallas Stars. General Manager Jim Nill has relieved Pete DeBoer of his coaching duties. What does it mean? Why did it happen? And who's going to be the next coach of the Dallas Stars? We'll break it all down next.
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. I'm Joey Erickson, former producer of 105 Through the Fan. Please be sure to subscribe. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And as always, thank you so much for making us a part of your day and making us your first listen. The offseason became that more interesting for the Dallas Stars, who announced this morning Pete DeBoer has been relieved of his coaching duties. The coaching search is now on, and the Stars are the only team in the NHL without a bench boss for next season. Who are the potential candidates? Who's going to usher in a new era of Dallas Stars hockey? We'll get to that, of course, but first we have to discuss why this happened, and the writing was really on the wall, and I'll tell you why. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So the reason I say the writing was on the wall is for a few reasons, but the main one is, and I continue to come back to this point, the rumors and rumblings following the Western Conference final exit that certain players were not happy with how DeBoer handled Jake Oettinger in Game 5 and other situations in that Western Conference final. I continue to come back to that. And many of you know I have defended DeBoer on pulling Jake Oettinger in Game 5, and I was not on the hype train to get rid of DeBoer immediately following another Western Conference final exit. But I started to change my tune, and for you everydayers out there that have been listening over the last few days, when I've touched on the DeBoer topic, it really worried me, it concerned me that there was some obvious rifts, whether that's relationship or trust issues between the head coach, Pete DeBoer, and certain players. And maybe it's Jake Oettinger, maybe it's the leadership group, but either way, as I said, you're going to have to get rid of him if he, quote unquote, lost the room. And for those of you wondering if he did, I think this answers your question. There was some trust issues between certain players and Pete DeBoer, and you cannot have those distractions moving in to next season. And Jake Oettinger, I don't think, was the lone reason why Jim Nill made this move. I think it's all-encompassing of the last 3 Western Conference final exits, where really it's been the same issues the past 3 seasons that have led to Dallas not getting over the hump and reaching a Stanley Cup final. But the Jake Oettinger situation was the nail in the coffin. And I defended him for pulling Jake Oettinger. I will still defend him for making a coaching decision in a high-intensity situation. But what really hurt him was throwing Jake Oettinger under the bus in that post-game press conference. We touched on this quite a bit. Right after the game, he runs over Jake Oettinger a bit and then kind of went back and forth a few times. And that is what really did him in. And to exacerbate that was what we heard in the exit interviews, which is still baffling, that DeBoer had still not talked with Jake Oettinger on what happened in Game 5 of that Western Conference final. A few days later, he is still not talked to him to provide some clarity on why he made the decision. And that is the nail in the coffin for Pete DeBoer. How you do not go talk to your franchise goaltender. He's going to be your number one, whether you like it or not, for the next 8 years. And to not even talk to him before the exit interviews. Just baffling. Just really, really baffling. And I can defend DeBoer on making a coaching decision, like I said, but that is what really did him in. And the more information, the more rumors and rumblings we're hearing out of the dressing room that there's some players that aren't too happy. This is the right decision. This is the right decision by Jim Nill. This was the right decision to move on, get a new voice in, and start fresh, because Jake Oettinger is your number one goaltender. And DeBoer's had some issues in the past. Look at his time in Vegas with Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Lehner. Remember the sword in the back of Marc-Andre Fleury posted by Fleury's agent? Well, we saw some of that again over the last few weeks. And I think Jim Nill made the right decision here, and I'll get you his full quote from this morning. After careful consideration, we believe that a new voice is needed in our locker room to push us closer to our goal of winning a Stanley Cup. We'd like to thank Pete for everything that he has helped our organization achieve over the past 3 seasons, and wish him nothing but the best moving forward. Nill also said he just completed a press conference this afternoon. He had no problem with Jake Oettinger being pulled in Game 5, but the post-game comments, there is probably some remorse there for DeBoer. And Nill also said, quote, "I just let go of a guy who went to 3 straight conference finals. That's not easy to do." And he also credited DeBoer with his professionalism overhearing the news. And it was a tough decision, I'm sure. And we even heard owner Tom Ghilardi mention that DeBoer is their guy. But I think Jim Nill made the right decision here. You cannot just throw your number one netminder under the bus after the offensive issues you had again for the third straight Western Conference Finals. The offensive issues that you had again. And yeah, the defense could have been better, and Otter could have played better. I think both of those things are true, but to just sort of run over Otter in the driveway a few times, like double down on it, it just wasn't a good look. It was a mistake, and ultimately the writing was on the wall. You cannot have any sort of distractions or any tension with your head coach, leadership group, let alone anybody in that dressing room. And also, I'll come back to this. Jake Oettinger is loved within that building and loved within the dressing room. A tremendous, tremendous professional Jake Oettinger is. Whether you think he's an elite goaltender, whether you think he's bad, right? I don't care. You cannot say that Jake Oettinger is not a professional. The way he handled those questions in the exit interview about a week ago, and his coach didn't have the decency to at least reach out and talk to him. That's just not a good look. Not a good look at all. And Jim Nill had to make a decision, and he took a swing. And now they're going to have to bring in a new voice, and it'll be rather intriguing. This is going to be fascinating because of what Jim Nill said. I just got rid of a guy that went to 3 straight conference finals. And like I said multiple times over the last few weeks, I was not in favor of getting rid of Pete DeBoer, but if there was going to be some relationship or trust issues that were severed, then you have to look into it and you have to make those tough decisions, because it would just be a total fiasco if you're going to have issues with Pete DeBoer and Otter, Pete DeBoer and Jamie Benn, whatever. It's just going to be a fiasco and unnecessary noise that the Stars do not need. This is Dallas. This is Stars. This is Stars hockey. They don't need to be dealing with any of that. And we saw it with Monty, right? He was just relieved, and we really didn't know at that time with Jim Montgomery the reasons why. He was just let go. But we can read into this a bit more, and just the fact that he didn't speak to Oettinger before the exit interviews and the post-game press conference that I mentioned that I did not love, with him just going, well, the fact is, it's a big sample size. Jake Oettinger has lost 5 of 7, whatever it was, against Edmonton. Just not a great look. And I think the Stars got ahead of this in a lot of ways, and I think it was the right decision. We'll see. We'll see how the Stars go about finding a new candidate, finding somebody to bring in to be the bench boss. Because at the end of the day, DeBoer did a lot of great things, and we're going to touch on some of that. And I also want to touch on what does this mean, because it goes back to what I said about Jim Nill at the trade deadline acquiring Mikko Rantanen. We'll do that in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money. You can start building wealth. You realize just how much you spend on food delivery, possibly entertainment, other things that you're spending your cash on when you use Monarch. And then you can budget smarter and save more. It's an all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and plan long-term goals for yourself or your partner. You can have shared and personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Well, I think many Stars fans got their answer to the question, had Pete DeBoer lost the locker room. And now I want to discuss, what does it mean? And I'm coming back to this, and this is my opinion, but I spoke about this when the Stars acquired Mikko Rantanen at the deadline, and this is on Jim Nill specifically. Jim Nill has lost his patience. Jim Nill is not the older, just quiet GM that says, I like where our team is at, right? That's always a bit that he's always in love, or he always likes his hockey team. He's getting impatient. He believes that he's put together a good enough roster over the last 3 or 4 years to at least get to a Stanley Cup final. Maybe he doesn't believe they should have won after watching Florida and Edmonton this past week. Stars are nowhere near any of those teams. I think we can be honest about that. But he believes they should have at least maybe gotten over the Western Conference final hump over the last 3 years. And he's growing impatient, and he's going to take big swings. And I said that after he went and traded for Mikko Rantanen. He is going to make big swings in order to make this team better and get them over the hump. And he's not going to just sit back anymore and just let things take care of themselves. And I think this is a big swing. I think this would qualify of a giant swing for Jim Nill. And the fact of the matter is, yes, DeBoer had a lot of regular season success, but he's 0-3 in the Western Conference final. And this sort of brings in the other part of why he was let go. The same issues continue to arise over the last 3 seasons. And he could not prove that he's good enough to get over the hump. And Jim Nill, along with the Jake Oettinger news and some of the comments there, I think had enough, and he's growing impatient. And I think that's good, because other teams that are impatient, they win Stanley Cups. Look at Vegas. Look at the way Florida has retooled. Look at Edmonton, making swings, making additions. It wins you Stanley Cups. It gets you to the pinnacle. And I credit Jim Nill for not just being complacent. And I mentioned this quote after acquiring Mikko Rantanen: complacency is the enemy of success. And the Stars cannot just run it back and do the same thing all over again next season with the head coach, with players. They have to make changes. And this is a big one. And we can applaud him for that. We can applaud Jim Nill for making this move. Whether you agree with it or not, I know there's still some people out there that believe Pete DeBoer should still be the head coach. And I think that's fair. Like I said, for the most part, I was there too, but I started to change my tune when you keep hearing information squeaking out that there's some players that are upset. Like, it's hard to just run it back again and act like everything's all fine and dandy, right? Complacency is the enemy of success. And Jim Nill is growing impatient. I think we saw that at the trade deadline too. Like, we have a really talented young guy in Stankoven, but we'll give him up and some picks, a lot of picks to go get an elite player like Mikko Rantanen. And I think we're seeing it now. He's not happy. He has won back-to-back NHL GM Year of the Award. He's really got nothing to show for it. Like, that's nice, but he has nothing to show for. He's got nothing tangible. Nothing tangible. And, of course, the tangible asset, the Stanley Cup. And they haven't even got to it. So I think that's what it means, in my opinion, for the Dallas Stars. That's what it means. And we'll go into some of what Pete DeBoer did in his last 3 seasons. If you look at the last 3 years in Dallas, DeBoer had 149 wins. It's quite a bit. That was top 10. It's top 5 actually in the NHL during that span. 327 points. That was the most in the NHL over the last 3 seasons. The Stars won a lot of games. They broke some franchise records a year previously. They were incredible. But they don't have a Stanley Cup to show for it. And look at the top 5 teams here in point totals over the regular season. The Dallas Stars, Carolina Hurricanes, Toronto Maple Leafs, Winnipeg Jets, and Boston Bruins. Look at those 5 teams. Dallas, Carolina, Toronto, Winnipeg, Boston. What do they all have in common over the last 3 years? Over the last 5 years? Over the last decade? No Stanley Cups. All that regular season success. Those top 5 teams over the last 3 years, they got nothing to show for it. Nothing to show for it. And then you go down, like, the Vegas is there. Colorado is there. Edmonton is there. Florida's 11th. Tampa Bay, they won a couple of cups, right? They're just outside the top 10. So something had to change, and this is a way to do it. And I'll defend Jim Nill for making a tough decision. I'm sure it was not easy, although I think some of the comments about Otter and stuff made it a bit easier. He's your number 1 goaltender, whether you like it or not. And it was a nail in the coffin. So the coaching search is on. Who's out there? Well, I mean, you could find a recycled coach. There's plenty of those out there. Jay Woodcroft, he was in Edmonton before he was let go. For Chris Knobloch, who is now the current head coach of Edmonton. I think Neil Graham of the Texas Stars is going to get a real look. And Jim Nill did say in his press conference that he's open-minded, whether it's a veteran or young coach. Look at a few years ago, too. He gave Jim Montgomery a go. And I think we all agreed that would have been a good move. Of course, there was some external conflicts that ended up leading to his firing. But Jim Montgomery was given a chance as a young coach coming out of Denver. I know David Carl's a hot topic, but David Carl is the head coach of Denver, won a national championship a couple of years ago. He got back to the national championship with the Pioneers this past season, fell short, but a very very hot commodity. I think he's someone a lot of teams. I think all 33 teams want a David Carl. I really do. But he just inked a new contract with Denver, so I don't think that's really reality. But you never know. Maybe Jim Nill can sweet talk him. But I think Neil Graham's going to get a really good look. The head coach for the Texas Stars, who's proving that he can win. He has a lot of relationships with the players that have come through that program, and the Stars are probably going to have a lot of young players from Texas that are going to get some shots next season. So there would be some continuity there if Neil Graham comes out. I think he has to be a top candidate the Stars are going to look at. So there's a lot of different options out there. Of course, I would like to see Jim Nill go a bit against the grain or against tradition, I guess you could say, and go after maybe a young up-and-coming coach. I don't want a recycled head coach like Laviolette, right? He's out there. I don't see the appeal of that in a lot of ways. I think maybe a young up-and-coming hook. Look at what Edmonton did with Chris Knobloch. And granted, he's got two of the best players in the world, but Knobloch has defeated DeBoer and back-to-back Western Conference final. There's something there. It's not just McDavid and Draisaitl. So a new era upcoming in Dallas. And there were some more updates Nill added on some injuries that I want to get into as well on the take-home segment. We'll do that in just a moment. So as always, we like to take a look at the injuries that come out following an exit from the Stanley Cup Finals, things that were, of course, were held very close to the vest. And Nill did share some updates on that. Tyler Seguin will rehab a shoulder injury over the summer. Rope Ahans had a broken foot. We did know that. Liam Bichsel had a shoulder injury, which isn't too big of a surprise in a lot of ways. Remember that spill he took in that series against Colorado. Could not believe he came back in that game. What a warrior for him to come back. That was a hard fall right into those boards. And I thought he was going to be out for the rest of the playoffs. And the fact that he came back and soldiered on was remarkable, but he did have a shoulder injury. So I don't think that's very, very surprising, but there you go. There was some updates on some injuries. Jim Nill did acknowledge the lack of offense in the playoffs and said they need to be open to different styles of play as they begin a coaching search. And as I said, Nill on a veteran versus young coach, he wants to be open-minded there. So I'm really curious. Again, Neil Graham, he's been the head coach of the Texas Stars since 2020, and we know what he's doing down there in the AHL. We touched on it yesterday. I think he's certainly going to be in the conversation. And then you have some guys, that have been around the block, right? Like Peter Laviolette, Dave Hackstall, right? There's some guys out there. Tortorella could be in the conversation. Joel Quenneville, of course, he already was hired, I believe, by Anaheim, if I'm not mistaken. But Jay Woodcroft is out there too. Woodcroft did a lot of great stuff in Edmonton, but he got off to that horrible start a few years ago, and that was sort of his doing in. But there's a lot of, I guess, your typical recycled head coaches that are out there, but Jim Nill wants to be open-minded, as he should, and they got to find a coach that can win with this roster number one. Like, this team is still built to win now. They have veterans, they have young talent, they have a little bit of everything. They really do. The Stars, at the end of the day, they have a lot of talent, but now it's about putting together and finding a coach that can help them get across the finish line, get across the hump. And I'm, I guess, intrigued to see this new era of Dallas Stars hockey upcoming. It was like DeBoer did a lot of great things. You can't argue that. Stars had one of their best 3 runs in franchise history outside of winning a Stanley Cup, but it was a very nice run. And they won a lot of playoff games too. I touched on the regular season success. If you go to the playoffs, the Stars won 29 playoff games. That was 3rd in the NHL over that span. Florida and Edmonton had more. DeBoer proved he could win in the playoffs, but for whatever reason, when it got to that point, it got to the finals, the Western Conference Finals, just struggled, and the offense laid an egg, and a lot of things went by the wayside. So again, I think this was the right move by Jim Nill based off what we were hearing coming out of the dressing room from certain sources that players were not happy. I think his comments on Otter certainly did him in, or certainly did not help, but it wasn't the only reason. 3 years to the Western Conference Finals is great, but nothing to show for it at the end of the day. And I think it means Jim Nill is impatient, and he's going to make moves because he feels like he's put together a good enough roster to at least get to the final. Maybe not win it, but I'm sure he believes he's given DeBoer a phenomenal roster, and maybe he's underachieved with it. That may be harsh, but maybe that's what he believes a bit deep down. So some fascinating conversations are going to be had over the next few weeks until the Stars find their head coach. The coaching search is on. We'll be here to break it all down, talk about potential candidates and stuff. Some of the ones I mentioned today: Woodcroft, Lavalette, Neil Graham, I think is going to get a real look at it, and he should be a popular candidate as well to be the new bench boss of the Dallas Stars. But bit of a bombshell this morning. I think a lot of Stars fans are happy with this. Trust me, I heard you. I heard you engaging with me on Twitter and other platforms that you're ready for DeBoer to be gone. So you got your wish. We'll see. We'll see if the grass is greener here this next season. But I want to thank you for all the love and support, as always, on all the recent videos. Y'all are amazing. I love doing this. I appreciate all you everydayers out there that join me here on Locked On Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And we got some more topics and more discussions to be had over the next few weeks in this offseason. So buckle up. It's going to be a great time. Hit that subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notification bell. Never miss an episode of Locked On Stars. Be sure to like and comment below how you feeling about Pete DeBoer being fired with 1 year left on his contract. We'll be back next week to discuss plenty more on the decision by Jim Nill and where do the Stars go from here. Enjoy the rest of your day, Stars fans. Enjoy the weekend. We'll see you next Monday.